Good morning. Can you all hear me? All right. It's so great to see your bright and shiny faces this morning. Not sure which season we'll end up with at the end of the day because we've had a couple different seasons happening most recently, but it's so good to see you all here today. Our focus at this year's DEI Summit is going to be remixing DEI. So my husband is a DJ, so I'm really getting into this kind of theme, remixing DEI. We're going to talk about why it's important to be innovative, and we're also going to make sure you walk away with tools that you can take back to your organizations so you can move your DEI strategies forward. But before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about my organization's experience with DEI. And I think it's important for me to kind of set the table with what our experience has been. So Cherry Health has actually been around for 30 years. We serve 60,000 under-resourced individuals across the state. About 60% of our patients are people of color. About 43% of our staff are people of color. Now, most people will look at those statistics and think, they must be really diverse and inclusive. And what I would say is there is some good diversity happening within Cherry Health, but we've really had to struggle, like some of you in the room have had to struggle, to make sure that everyone feels that they're a part of the team and feels inclusive. So if you're in the audience and you've struggled with DEI, this is confession moment. If you've struggled with DEI, raise your hand. And I'm raising my hand. All right, so it looks like we're in good company. Many of us have struggled in the space. And my confession is that it's taken actually 4 times for Cherry Health to get our DEI efforts up and running. So 2 of those times happened prior to myself becoming CEO. And then the 3rd time happened just before the pandemic. So we started the work, we were really excited about the work, and then the pandemic happened, so we had to divert many of our resources to the pandemic. The 4th time happened just after the pandemic. And that was really an interesting opportunity because we realized we can't hold this work within our organization. We can't get it up and running ourselves. We really need help and support to make sure that we're driving our DEI strategies forward. So we actually outsourced. And when you outsource, it doesn't matter if someone leaves the organization, if people get promoted and they change roles, you can still drive the work forward. Now we're finally moving forward in our DEI efforts with our first phase just being completed. We trained 800 individuals, not just our staff, but also our board. And I think for those of you in the audience, if you're not engaging your board and all of your staff in your DEI efforts, you might as well forget it. And if your CEO is not committed to DEI, it's never gonna take root. Yeah, that is a hand clap, come on. Now, when DEI is operationalized appropriately, you can experience some really amazing outcomes. I want to anchor the summit today with just some basic definitions because I'm not going to presume that everyone in the room has already started your DEI journey. So I just want to start off with sharing a couple of definitions that I think you all might find interesting. So let's talk about diversity. Diversity, you can see the definition there, but it's just how we bring ourselves into spaces and places like this. Like what attributes, what characteristics do we bring with us in our day-to-day lives? So I'm a Black woman, I'm married, I'm a Christian, I have 6 children, by the way. I'm a doctoral candidate, just finished my coursework. Yeah. And I'm also 50 years old. Now, I'm looking at all of my friends in the audience who didn't tell me that my check engine light was gonna come on at 50, because my internal check engine light has come on recently. But those are all of the identities that I present with. So we actually had our entire staff and board go through an identity discovery process. And as a part of that process, you'll see on the next slide with the diversity wheel, we talked about what are all of the identities that we bring with us. So there are the usual suspects, right? There's, age, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, and race. But then there are other things like military experience. There's, job classification. There are things like education and things that we don't always think about. But those are all of the things that make us unique and that, sets us apart from others. So you might ask, if those are the things that make us unique, why is there like a hyper focus on gender and ethnic diversity? And there's a reason for that. There's evidence that actually shows that organizations that prioritize diversity from the standpoint of gender diversity and ethnic diversity are more profitable. And you're going to hear about that later. Staff are more engaged. All of us are struggling with workforce right now. Raise your hand if you're struggling with workforce. Same. So if you're in a situation where this is a struggle that you're facing, DEI is another tool in your toolbox to try to address some of those challenges. And I would also say that, every organization in this room, every board chair, every CEO should really be focused on DEI as a strategy to improve your bottom line. Because what we're seeing is that your bottom line can improve 20% compared to your peers if these initiatives truly take root. So again, think about that as you're considering whether or not there's a return on investment with DEI. Next slide, please. So equity, what is equity? Equity is fairness and justice, not to be confused with equality. So equality is identifying that everybody doesn't have the same starting point, that there are individuals that need accommodations to be able to level set and rise to the level that other individuals, sit at. And I think equity is something that people struggle with too for some reason. I read something recently that said, when people are accustomed to privilege, equity can feel like oppression. When people are accustomed to privilege, equity can feel like oppression. But that's not the purpose of equity. Equity is meant to bring all of us to a place where we have the same opportunities, despite our backgrounds, despite our experiences, that we have the same opportunity to pursue the best life that we all want to have. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Now, the next definition you'll see here is focused around inclusion. So did you guys know that 68% of your staff right now are disengaged? 68%. And this is in my opinion, this is according to a Gallup survey, that 68% of our staff right now today are disengaged. And disengaged employees either leave your organizations or they become quiet quitters. Who's familiar with what a quiet quitter is? So for those of you that are not familiar, a quiet quitter is an individual who does the absolute bare minimum when they're working. They hold all of your staff back. They're waiting to be fired in some ways, which is obviously tricky. So inclusion is when everyone works together, everyone feels that their opinion is valued and respected. There's a sense of belonging that comes along with inclusion. And that belonging can lead to better engagement, which leads to staff retention, okay? So just a quick summary of all of the things that I just mentioned. Diversity is gonna ask who's in the room. That's who's in the room. Equity is gonna ask who's trying to get into the room, but they're facing barriers to being in the room. Inclusion is gonna ask, has everyone's perspective and ideas been respected and even understood? And then belonging goes a step further with asking if everyone is feeling valued, if their ideas are being actually considered as you move your organization forward. Now, whether your company is in your first attempt at DEI or your 21st attempt at DEI, we're gonna give you some tools today to help you move your efforts forward. We've got you, for sure. So I hope that you all take an opportunity to really reflect on where your organization is, today, but to think about where you want it to be a year from now. So next, we're going to bring up a friend of mine. His name is Mr. Ovell Barbie. So Ovell is the owner and principal of Ovell Rome and Associates, and a renowned visionary human resources leader, consultant, and speaker with a passion for diversity, equity, and inclusion. He's held leadership roles at Fortune 500 companies in an array of industries including Motorola, Blue Cross Blue Shield, General Motors, OnStar, now Corewell Health, and Indiana University. Please welcome Ovell Barbie to the stage.